It was another evening at the small family restaurant on the edge of town. People came here not because it was fancy, but because it felt familiar and warm. The yellow lights inside made the room look softer, and the smell of baked bread and warm soup drifted quietly through the air. Behind the counter, clearing dishes and greeting customers with a gentle smile, stood Lena Carter. She had been working here for almost 3 years. Most people only saw her as the polite waitress who remembered their favorite drink, or the side of sauce they always asked for. But for Lena, this place was something like a quiet escape. She entered at 4 in the afternoon, tied her hair back, put on the brown apron with the restaurant name stitched on the top corner, and stepped into a world where she needed no explanations. She simply moved table to table, bringing food, collecting plates, and saying soft thank yous. Nobody knew that before this job, Lena used to sit at a piano for hours every day. Nobody knew that she once dreamed of studying music. Nobody asked, and she never mentioned it. Life had put that dream somewhere far behind, covered in dust, like an old picture stored in a box. On that evening, the restaurant was busier than usual because of the festival happening in town. Cars lined the street outside, families walked and dressed in bright colors, and a group of college students gathered around a corner table, stirring laughter across the room. Lena moved from table to table, carrying baskets of garlic rolls and chilled glasses of lemonade. Her smile was small but real. In the far corner of the restaurant stood a piano. It had been there longer than Lena had worked here. People said it once belonged to the original owner, who loved to play on quiet nights. Now it just sat untouched. Sometimes children pressed random keys when adults weren't watching, but that was it. The piano had become background furniture, something you could ignore like a dusty bookshelf. Lena passed by the piano several times that night, each time giving it a brief glance, but never slowing down. She knew exactly how it felt to hold music inside, but not let it out. She knew what it was like to stand close to something you once loved, and pretend it didn't matter anymore. Around 7, a family walked in, parents, grandparents, and 2 kids. They took a long table, laughing loudly. After them came an older couple who liked sitting near the window. Then a man alone walked in, wearing a dark coat and carrying a notebook. He sat near the piano, though no one paid attention to that detail at the time. The restaurant got louder. Glasses clinked, forks scraped plates. Small conversations filled the room like ripples of sound. Lena worked through it calmly, as she always did. She greeted each guest, wrote orders on her pad, and passed them to the kitchen. When she reached the table with the couple near the window, they asked how her day had been. She didn't say much, just that it was busy. She never shared more than that. Her world stayed private, tucked somewhere safe. Someone played music from their phone at low volume while waiting for their meal. Another group was telling a story and laughing loudly, but not annoyingly. The chef shouted an order number, and Lena hurried to collect the plates. Nothing about the night seemed important. Nothing seemed unusual. It was the kind of evening that passes, without anyone remembering it the next day. But even ordinary evenings sometimes hold stories waiting quietly to unfold. Inside Lena's pocket was an old piano charm attached to her keys. She rarely took it out, but it was always with her. She got it years ago, back when she believed her life would revolve around music. Her father worked long shifts to help her attend lessons. Her mother encouraged her by writing little notes and sticking them on her bedroom door. "You can do it. Proud of you. Keep going." She played at small community events. She won a couple of awards. People said she could have a big future. Then life changed. Her father lost his job. Her mother became sick. Savings were used for things more urgent than piano classes. Her dream did not break, it just faded, slowly, quietly, without sound. She took the first job she could get, then another, then this one. A part of her kept telling herself she would return to music eventually. But time kept passing. Now she was here serving warm meals, smiling gently, hiding old dreams behind everyday tasks. Midway through the shift, she stood behind the counter organizing bills. The man in the dark coat near the piano kept writing in his notebook. He looked up sometimes, noticing the space around him, listening to the conversations, observing everything. Lena didn't think much of him. People often came alone to eat or think or read. She continued her work, having no idea how her life would bend that night. A little later, one of the kids from the big family approached the piano. Without asking anyone, he tapped a key, one single random note. It sounded uneven because the piano hadn't been tuned in years. His parents called him back, laughing, and he ran to his seat again. Everyone returned to their conversations, But the man near the piano kept looking at the instrument. Lena noticed. She wasn't sure why. Maybe he liked old things. Maybe he used to play. Maybe he wrote about music. She assumed nothing. The kitchen door swung open again. Steam and heat rushed out, carrying the smell of fresh soup. Lena served 3 more tables, collected dirty plates, and brought extra napkins to someone. Across the room, a group of teenagers argued over whether to stay for dessert or continue to the fair in town. Their excitement added a soft liveliness to the room. Lena's feet hurt, as they usually did after 2 hours of walking back and forth. Her shoulders ached slightly, but fatigue was familiar and didn't bother her. Outside the window, lanterns from the festival glowed along the street. People passed by laughing, holding hands, carrying bags of treats from stalls, and inside, the restaurant stayed warm like a pocket of quiet light. The old piano continued sitting there, waiting in silence. In one corner, customers talked about travel plans. Someone described a new movie. Another table discussed their workday. Life around Lena felt simple and predictable. She thought about taking a small break. She thought about pouring herself a glass of water. But another order came in. She walked again. Later that evening, when most tables were full, the man with the notebook closed it and set it aside. He looked around slowly, observing the people and the atmosphere, almost like he was studying something invisible. Then he turned his eyes to Lena. She didn't notice because she was busy bringing cups of tea to the older couple. There was nothing dramatic happening, not yet. No sound changed. No one paused. The night still blended into routine. But even routines hold secrets when time decides to reveal them. At that moment, Lena simply moved to another table, unaware that someone had noticed something in her she didn't even remember clearly anymore. The night continued quietly, smooth and unchanged. The only thing unusual was that someone, somewhere inside that crowded room, had begun to see more in her than any regular customer ever had. And that was how an ordinary evening began, without noise, without expectation, without warning. The evening was moving forward, the restaurant growing even busier as more people walked in after the festival outside. The air inside was warm, filled with the smell of baked cheese and roasted vegetables. Plates clattered softly as they were stacked behind the counter, and the low hum of different conversations settled into the room, rising and falling like moving waves. Lena stepped around the tables, carrying a tray of drinks. Her movements were neat, practiced, and calm. She could hold 4 glasses in one hand without spilling a drop, something she had learned after months of balancing trays during busy hours. At the far end of the restaurant, the man in the dark coat sat near the piano. He was not eating yet. He had finished writing in his notebook and now had his hands wrapped loosely around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. His attention drifted across the room, quiet, focused, almost searching. When Lena walked past his table, he looked up. "Excuse me," he said in a polite tone. She paused. Customers often called her, asked for condiments, refills, or extra napkins. "Yes. How can I help you?" she asked kindly. He gestured toward the piano beside him. "Does anyone ever play this?" Lena looked at the instrument for a moment. Her voice stayed soft. "No, not anymore. It hasn't been used in a long time." The man nodded slowly, almost disappointed but not surprised. "You know how to play?" he asked calmly. Lena's shoulders stiffened, though her face remained neutral. "I used to," she answered gently. "A long time ago." He watched her expression, the way her gaze lowered slightly, as if pulling a curtain over part of her past. "Why did you stop?" he asked. Lena didn't answer immediately. She took a small breath. "Life changed," she said simply. He did not push further. "Not yet. I would like to hear it," he said. She looked at him, surprised, uncertain. "I'm just working," she replied, as if that single statement explained everything. He nodded, but did not stop. "You could play one song," he said gently. "Just one." Lena shook her head. "I haven't played in years. It's not the same anymore." Someone at another table called her name. She excused herself quickly and walked away, grateful for the interruption. She tried to forget the conversation. She carried plates, delivered food, wiped tables, took new orders. The man near the piano did not move, did not rush, did not leave. He waited. Lena tried not to look toward him, but every time she walked past his table, the piano sat beside him like a question she didn't want to answer. A group of young people near the front of the room started talking about music. One of them mentioned an old singer from the past. Another talked about how playing an instrument helped them make friends on campus. Their laughter and stories floated across the room. Lena heard it, but looked down and continued working. The man waited until she came back near his table again. "You know," he said, not loudly, "a gift doesn't disappear just because you stop using it." His words made her pause as if she had walked into an unexpected wind. She kept her eyes on the floor. "I don't play anymore," she repeated. He studied her quietly. "What stopped you?" he asked. She didn't want to answer. She didn't want to remember the years when life shifted so suddenly that she had to stop doing what she loved. So she stayed quiet. He continued speaking calmly. "Sometimes the world moves too fast, faster than we can follow. But people who are meant to create something always find their way back to it." She wanted to walk away again, but something about his voice held her still, not forcefully, just gently. Then he asked another question. "Do your co-workers know you played?" She shook her head. "No, there's no need for them to know." "But you do know," he replied. Lena opened her mouth to answer but could not find the words. She pressed her lips together and took another order slip from her apron pocket, pretending she needed to write something down. For a moment, she felt exposed, like someone had opened a piece of her life she had worked very hard to close. Before she could step away again, the man said quietly, "One song, not for anyone else, just to feel what it's like again." His voice held no pressure. It was almost peaceful. She looked at the piano. Its wooden cover was scratched. The keys were probably dusty. It was an old object lost in time, and yet, part of her heart responded, almost painfully. "You don't understand," she said softly. He replied gently, "Maybe I don't, but I do understand what silence does to a person who was made for sound." Her eyes lifted slowly, not fully, but enough that their gazes met. At another table, a small child dropped a spoon. Someone laughed. A chair slid across the floor. Normal sounds continued, but inside her chest something began tightening. She walked away without a word. She kept working, moving faster, as if motion could undo the feeling that had stirred inside her. Minutes passed, then longer. She thought maybe he would leave. Maybe he would grow bored and walk out into the night. But he didn't. He ordered food at last, eating slowly. He didn't talk to anyone else. He just sat, looking around occasionally. Patient. Lena pretended not to notice, but every time she turned, he was still there. Later in the evening, when most tables had been served and the rush began to quiet down, Lena took a moment behind the counter to rest her hands. The older couple she had served earlier waved goodbye and told her to take care. She smiled, grateful. A few co-workers began cleaning nearby tables, clearing sauce bottles, stacking cups. Then a voice spoke again. "Just one song," the man said. She turned toward him. "I can't," she said quietly. "I don't even remember how it feels anymore." "You remember," he said, gently confident. "You just pretend you don't." Lena swallowed. He stood up slowly, not to leave, but to step closer to the piano. He tapped the wooden surface lightly. "You walk past this every day, almost like it belongs to you." "It doesn't," she replied. "It does more than you think." Something in his voice carried a strange certainty, as if he already knew the end of the story she had not yet lived. He stepped back and sat again. "I won't ask again," he said, "but I'll wait, just in case you change your mind." Lena walked away again, her footsteps faster than before. She told herself it was foolish. She told herself she had nothing to prove. She told herself her life already made sense. Steady job, small routines, predictable days. But her heart did not listen. At one point she stood behind the counter, gripping her own hands tightly, staring at nothing. She remembered the first time she played a piano in public. She remembered her father clapping louder than anyone. She remembered her mother wiping tears of joy. She remembered the sound filling a hall, fuller than anything she had ever heard. She remembered feeling seen. A small ache rose from inside her, not painful, just old. She took a deep breath. A co-worker asked her if she was fine. She nodded quickly. The man still waited, calm, patient. At another table, a woman asked Lena for a refill. As she poured the drink, her hands trembled, not from tiredness but from something else. For the first time in years, the idea of touching keys again did not feel impossible. It felt frightening. Frightening because it still mattered. She went back to the counter. She stood still for several seconds. The piano sat silently. The man waited silently. And the night seemed to slow down, not for everyone else, but only for her. Something inside her whispered, almost like a quiet memory, "You know how to play." She looked toward the piano once more. Her pulse moved faster. Her fingers curled as if remembering shapes. And even though her feet did not move yet, the first step toward that old dream, had already begun inside her, small, quiet, unmistakable. The restaurant was quieter now. The rush had passed. Most customers were already eating slowly, finishing their meals, or waiting for dessert. The evening felt softer, not loud like earlier, and the warm lights above the tables seemed calmer too. Lena stood near the counter, wiping a tray even though it was already clean. She was not nervous in a visible way, but inside her chest something was shifting, pushing against old walls she had built over the years. She took slow breaths, trying to calm the strange fluttering inside. The man near the piano was still there. He had not looked away from her in a demanding manner, only steady like someone waiting for the result of something he already believed would happen. She did not walk toward him yet. Her feet stayed planted, as if moving would confirm something bigger than she was ready to accept. But eventually, she stopped wiping that tray, set it down, and walked around the counter. She moved past tables. No one was watching her, or so she hoped. But one of the older ladies at a nearby table lifted her eyes and followed her movement with curiosity, not with judgment, but friendly interest. The man noticed her approaching and sat straighter. Lena stopped in front of the piano, not too close, not touching it, just near enough to feel its presence. "I can't promise anything," she said under her breath. "You don't have to," he replied. Softly. She slowly reached forward and lifted the wooden cover above the keys. The sound of it rising, though light, echoed in her chest like a memory unfolding. She paused, looking at the keys, yellowed, dusty, not perfect. She brushed a finger across the surface. Her hand trembled slightly. "It's been a long time," she whispered. "You haven't forgotten as much as you think." The man told her. She didn't answer. Instead, she sat down on the small padded bench. The seat was colder than she expected. It made her feel like a child again, sitting at her first piano lesson. She adjusted her posture automatically, without thinking. One of her co-workers noticed and whispered to another, surprised. The whisper spread softly from table to table. Some people turned. Others slowed their conversations. Forks hovered above plates. Drinks were set down. Lena stared at the keys. Her breath caught slightly. Her fingers hovered. She pressed one note. A single soft sound filled the space, broken. Not sharp, imperfect, but real. The restaurant went silent almost instantly. The couple near the window leaned forward. A child sitting with her parents stopped chewing. Even someone washing dishes in the back paused. It felt as though the sound had reached every corner of the room. Lena didn't look up. She didn't want to see reactions. She didn't want expectations. She pressed another key. Then another. Slowly, doubtful, unsure, she began forming a short melody, something simple, something she remembered from childhood practice sessions. Her hand moved differently now. No tremble. Her shoulders relaxed. Her head tilted slightly, listening. The man near the piano closed his eyes briefly, not dramatic, simply appreciating what he already knew existed. Lena took a slow breath and continued. What came next was not loud, not bold, not grand, but something sincere. A line of notes lifted gently into the air. People leaned closer. Someone whispered, "I didn't know she could play." A group near the door fell silent. Chairs stopped moving, and Lena felt something inside her loosen like a knot untied. Her fingers moved slightly faster now, not rehearsed, but guided by instinct. It was not the piece she played at her last recital years ago. It was something she had written when she still believed music could belong to her future. She thought she had forgotten it, but her hands remembered. The melody formed clearer patterns. Light, warm, almost emotional. She remembered writing this piece late at night in her old room, sitting with a small lamp beside her, knowing no one else would ever hear it. She remembered her mother telling her to rest. She remembered saying, "Just let me finish this part." She remembered her father sitting on the couch listening while pretending to read a newspaper. She remembered herself smiling. She hadn't smiled like that in years. Her fingers moved with more certainty now, filling the room gently but completely. Customers forgot about food. Someone rested their chin on their palm. A group of teenagers stopped scrolling on their phones. Not because the song was loud or impressive, but because it was honest. It was clear that this was not just someone pressing keys. This was someone remembering who she once had been. The man next to her did not speak. He didn't nod, didn't encourage. He simply let the moment shape itself. Toward the final part of the melody, Lena softened the notes, slowing her pace. Her expression shifted, not sad, not joyful, something in between. When the last tone faded, she lifted her hands and placed them in her lap. The silence afterward was larger. Then the music. No one moved for several seconds. Then suddenly, the room filled with applause. It wasn't loud cheering. It wasn't wild excitement. It was genuine appreciation, warm, long, real. Someone whistled softly. Someone else wiped tears from their eyes. A small child clapped loudly, smiling. Lena's face turned warm, almost embarrassed. She looked down quickly, as if she wanted to hide. The man leaned toward her and spoke, quietly. "That's still yours," he said. She stood from the bench slowly. "I just played one song," she murmured. "That was enough," he replied. Her co-workers smiled, proud and a bit stunned. One of them said, "Why didn't you ever tell us you could play like that?" Lena shrugged, unable to answer clearly. Some customers said things like, "That was beautiful. You should play more often. How long have you been practicing?" She didn't know how to handle the compliments. She simply bowed her head slightly and walked back toward the counter. She did not feel dramatic. She did not feel heroic. She just felt lighter. Her hands still tingled. She turned back once and glanced at the piano. The instrument that had been nothing more than old wood an hour earlier now felt alive. The man had remained near it. He watched her walk back, patient, calm. Later, when customers began leaving, several came to thank her again. A few said the night felt more special because of what she had played. One person told her the music reminded them of their late father. Someone else said it made them think about their childhood. Lena did not know what to say other than, "I'm glad you liked it." When the crowd thinned and tables began clearing, the man walked up to the counter. "You didn't lose anything," he said quietly. She swallowed. "I'm not sure what comes next," she admitted. "You don't need to know," he replied. "You just need to remember that your ability is still alive." She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. He nodded back. Gentle, he gathered his notebook, folded his coat over his arm, and prepared to leave. Before he walked out the door, he turned and said, "If you want help finding your way back to music, I can guide you." Her eyes widened slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. "No one ever feels ready," he said, "but you will feel called to it." And tonight was the beginning. Then he stepped outside. The night air rushed in for a second before the door closed again. Lena stood behind the counter, looking at the entrance long after he had disappeared. She wasn't sure if anything would change tomorrow, or next week, or next month, but something was already different, not in the world, just in her, and that difference was enough to make her heart beat with new intention. The restaurant lights dimmed slowly as closing time approached. She walked one last time past the piano. She stopped. She touched the top of it lightly, not to play, not to open, just to feel its presence. Then she whispered, barely audible, "I remember," and that memory, by itself, was a quiet beginning. The restaurant had mostly emptied, leaving only a few lingering customers enjoying the last moments of their evening. Lena wiped the counter slowly, her hands still tingling from the music she had played earlier. Each movement felt different now, lighter, more aware. Her chest held a quiet energy that hadn't been there in years. The piano, sitting quietly in its corner, seemed to hum softly with its own life, waiting for her next touch. Her co-workers began stacking chairs and cleaning tables, talking quietly among themselves about how beautiful the music had been. Lena smiled faintly, not because of the praise, but because she felt something stirring inside her, a memory of herself that she had thought long gone. The man who had asked her to play earlier had already left, but the effect of his presence lingered. His words replayed in her mind, "Your ability is still alive," and tonight was the beginning. It wasn't just encouragement. It felt like a call she couldn't ignore, even if she wanted to. As she moved through the emptying dining room, she noticed the lingering warmth of people's reactions. Plates were cleaned, crumbs swept, chairs pushed back, but in the quiet, the music still seemed to hang in the air, invisible but tangible. Every note she had played seemed to resonate in the space, like a secret that only she and a few others shared. She walked past the piano again, drawn to it almost by instinct. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She didn't play yet. She didn't need to. Just being near it, knowing she had the power to create sound and feeling, was enough. Her mind wandered back to her childhood. She remembered sitting at a small piano at home, late at night, when the house was quiet and the world outside seemed too large and fast. Her fingers had moved automatically then, guided by memory, feeling, and love. Music had been a friend that never judged, a constant companion through both joy and fear. She realized how much she had missed that quiet intimacy. Suddenly, one of the lingering customers, an older woman with kind eyes, walked over and softly said, That music tonight. It was like you opened a window we didn't know was closed. Thank you." Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest. She nodded silently, unsure of what to say. Words seemed unnecessary. The connection had already been made through sound. The older woman smiled, returned to her seat, and eventually left, leaving Lena alone with her thoughts. The quiet of the restaurant was different now. It wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. She returned to the piano. Slowly, she placed her fingers on the keys, just resting them there, feeling their texture, the coolness, the potential in each one. The notes were waiting, like an invitation, not demanding, just patient. She pressed a single key. The note floated into the air. She pressed another, then another. Her hands moved carefully at first, then more freely as the melody began to take shape. This time, she wasn't nervous. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply remembering what it felt like to create something that belonged entirely to her. The music began softly, almost like a whisper. It carried through the empty tables, across the room, wrapping around the walls and ceiling. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound fill her completely. She could feel the echoes in her chest, each vibration reminding her of moments she had buried under responsibilities, under fear, under the noise of everyday life. Her fingers moved faster now, forming the notes she had composed years ago but never shared with anyone. The song had always been private, a reflection of her dreams and emotions, a story that had lived in the small corners of her heart. But now it was alive in the room, touching the empty chairs, the walls, and the floorboards as if it had always been meant to be heard. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. She could feel the presence of the audience. She imagined the ones she had played for long ago, the ones who had cheered her, the ones who had listened silently, the ones who had inspired her to write and play. Their echoes seemed to mingle with the notes, carrying the music farther than the restaurant walls. For the first time in years, Lena allowed herself to smile while playing. It wasn't a showy smile or a forced one. It was the smile of someone remembering who they truly were, someone reconnecting with a part of themselves that had been dormant but never gone. The notes began to rise and fall like gentle waves, each one carrying a story. The melody shifted, soft and reflective at first, then growing bolder, more confident, more alive. It was no longer the hesitant playing of a girl who doubted herself. It was the music of a woman who had faced life, who had stepped through the quiet pain and responsibilities, and who now remembered her own strength. Time seemed to stretch. Lena lost herself in the music. She forgot about the empty restaurant, the fading customers, the noise outside. There was only her, the piano, and the song she had been holding inside for years. Her breathing matched the rhythm of her hands, her heart beat with the tempo of the music. Each note was not just sound, but feeling, memory, hope, and release. It was as if she were speaking without words, telling the story of herself, of dreams postponed, of emotions tucked away, of courage rediscovered. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the music lingered in the air like a soft echo. She opened her eyes slowly, breathing heavily, but with a sense of calm triumph. The room was silent, but it felt full of the invisible weight and beauty of what had just happened. Her co-workers had paused their cleaning, watching quietly, moved by the depth of feeling they could not put into words. One of them whispered to another, "I didn't know she could do that. Not like this." Even though the restaurant was practically empty, Lena felt surrounded, not by people, but by the presence of life she had once known, by the echoes of her own past, and by the possibilities of the future. She stood and stretched, still aware of the piano, still aware of the small, powerful connection that had been reignited. She realized that music was not just about performance or recognition. It was about being true to herself, about allowing her heart and hands to speak together. For a long time, she sat quietly on the bench, reflecting on what had happened. She knew that this one evening, this single choice to play, had changed something inside her. She didn't need applause, though she had received it earlier. She didn't need validation. She needed only the truth she had rediscovered within herself. The night continued, and the last customers trickled out, leaving tips and thanks. Lena collected the plates and trays with a light heart, still feeling the music in her veins. She glanced at the piano one last time, before beginning to close up. She knew this was not the end. It was a beginning. She could feel it. Something had shifted, and she could no longer ignore it. She wanted to explore what she had rediscovered, to understand where her music could take her now, and to embrace the courage that had been quietly waiting for her. As she turned off the lights and locked the door, Lena realized that a part of her had returned that night, a part that was alive, daring, and ready to create again. And for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see what would happen next. The morning after that night felt different to Lena. She woke up with a lightness in her chest, a kind of quiet excitement that she hadn't felt in years. The alarm clock rang, but she didn't reach to turn it off immediately. She lay there for a moment, letting herself breathe in the thought that something had shifted inside her. Music had returned to her life, not fully, but enough to awaken something that had been asleep for far too long. At work, she moved through her usual routines with a different sense of purpose. She still took orders, carried trays, and greeted customers politely, but her steps were lighter, her smiles more genuine. There was a small fire in her eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. Even during the busiest or happiest days she had worked here, the piano in the corner of the restaurant had not been touched since the night before. But Lena felt its presence calling her. She passed it several times, unable to resist glancing toward it. A small, private thrill ran through her. It was hers, in a way, and no one else could take it. Later in the day, while the restaurant had its usual steady stream of customers, there was a knock at the door. Lena looked up from cleaning a table and saw a man standing there, carrying a small folder and a calm, confident smile. She recognized him immediately, the man from the previous night. "Good morning," he said politely. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "You're not," Lena replied, feeling a little shy. "I didn't expect to see you again. I wanted to follow up," he said. "I'd like to offer you an opportunity, if you're willing to consider it." Lena raised her eyebrows slightly, unsure what he meant. She gestured for him to come inside. They sat near the piano. He opened the folder and showed her some documents, letters of invitation, and information about a local music scholarship program. "I think you have the potential to do more with your music," he said. "You've already shown me that. I want to help you find a place where it can grow." Lena looked down at the papers. Part of her wanted to laugh, it seemed impossible. Another part of her wanted to cry. She hadn't thought about music in terms of opportunities or awards for years. It had been a private part of herself, tucked away safely. But here it was, offered to her again, as if the universe had remembered and sent someone to remind her. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said softly. "I haven't played in so long." "You don't need to be perfect," he replied. "You just need to take the first step. You've already begun." Lena thought about the night before, about the notes that had filled the restaurant, about the faces of the few people who had stayed and listened. She thought about how alive she had felt, even if just for a little while. That feeling hadn't left her, it had stayed with her, quietly urging her forward. She nodded slowly. "I'll think about it," she said. She didn't want to commit yet, but she also knew she couldn't ignore this chance. The man smiled gently. "That's all I ask. Take your time. When you're ready, you'll know." He left a card with his contact information and a soft, reassuring look. Lena watched him go out the door and stand for a moment in the morning light before walking away. She felt a strange mix of fear and hope. As the day went on, Lena continued her work, but every time she passed the piano, she felt a pull. She couldn't resist any longer. When there were no customers around, she sat on the bench again. She let her fingers hover over the keys, feeling the familiar grooves and textures. She pressed a note, then another. The sound floated through the empty restaurant, soft and comforting. Her hands moved slowly, testing the memory, exploring the shapes of chords and melodies. The piano had not been played much, so the sound was uneven, but that didn't matter. The music was hers, and it was enough. She closed her eyes and began playing a simple tune she remembered from her childhood. She didn't think about perfection or audience. She only thought about feeling the music, letting it flow from her hands, letting the notes tell the story she had kept inside for years. Hours passed in a quiet rhythm. Customers came and went, some smiling at the gentle music in the background, some too focused on their meals to notice. Lena played and played, slowly regaining confidence, discovering new variations, experimenting with the keys she had avoided for so long. She realized how much she had missed this intimacy with music, the way it could express what words could not, the way it could hold her attention completely, the way it could heal and inspire. Music wasn't just a skill, it was part of who she was. By the end of her shift, Lena felt different, not like she had on the day before, but like someone who had taken the first step toward reclaiming a long-lost part of herself. She cleaned the last tables, turned off the lights, and locked the door, feeling a sense of accomplishment beyond her usual duties. That evening, she sat at home with the card from the man on the kitchen table. reading the information again. She imagined herself stepping into a classroom, meeting teachers, learning again, performing for people who wanted to hear her music. It felt both frightening and exhilarating. She realized she was ready to try. Over the next few weeks, Lena started practicing more regularly. She visited the piano in the restaurant whenever she could, and sometimes even brought small notebooks to write down ideas and melodies. Each time she played, her confidence grew. Each note reminded her of the joy and passion that had never truly left her. One afternoon, she called the number on the card. Her voice trembled slightly, but she managed to speak clearly. She explained that she wanted to take the first steps, that she was ready to explore the scholarship program. The man's voice on the other end was warm and encouraging, guiding her through the initial steps. Soon, Lena found herself attending her first sessions. She met other musicians, teachers, and students who shared her passion. She learned new techniques, revisited old ones, and discovered parts of her creativity she had never explored. It was challenging, but it was also exhilarating. Back at the restaurant, she played the piano whenever she had free moments, not for anyone else, but for herself. The customers who noticed her playing seemed to feel the difference too. Some stopped to listen, some smiled knowingly, and some simply carried on, letting the music quietly touch their day. Months passed. Lena grew more confident, more connected to her music, and more in tune with herself. She performed in small recitals, each one a little more confident than the last. Her fingers moved with agility and emotion, her compositions carrying the depth of years of feeling and experience. One day, the man who had first encouraged her returned. He watched her perform with a quiet satisfaction. Proud of the journey she had taken, Lena realized how far she had come, not just in skill, but in courage and belief in herself. She knew the road ahead was still long. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and days when the music seemed distant again. But she also knew something stronger. She had rediscovered herself, and no one could take that away. Every time she played, she remembered that ordinary night when a man asked her to play a single note. That moment had frozen the room, but more importantly, it had awakened her. It had reminded her that life, even in its quietest and most routine moments, can hold opportunities to reclaim dreams, to reconnect with passion, and to step into a future that feels alive. Lena smiled quietly to herself, looking at the piano that had changed everything. She pressed a single key, letting the note linger in the empty space. It was a simple sound, but it carried the weight of everything she had remembered and everything she was becoming. Her life had changed, not because of fame or recognition, but because she had chosen to listen to herself, to take a step toward what she had always loved. And as the note echoed softly, she realized that this was just the beginning of the story she was meant to live.